So I would hire coaches and consultants and people to help me grow, and they would tell me to like run cold DMs, which I'd rather jump off a tall building than do cold DMs, honestly. I'd rather bang my head against a wall. But honestly, for me, it was like, I'm not doing that. So I'll just blow all my money on Facebook ads. I'd rather go bankrupt than run cold DMs. So that's what I did. I just ran Facebook ads. You don't have to be a certified Facebook expert and have 44 years of experience to start doing this. I didn't. When I was in the beginning, I was like 26 years old and had no idea. We've been around for about 5 years. We've done about 50 million in revenue.
If you want to build a legitimate, profitable online business without shiny objects, without the hypey gimmicks, and without the stress and overwhelm, if you want to make more money without having to be present online all day, every day, pumping out content that nobody sees and hustling DMs to generate leads and sales, then this is the place for you. Welcome to the Digital Trailblazer Podcast, your online business university, where you'll learn how ordinary people start from ground zero with no influence, no email list or audience to sell to, and no business or marketing experience, and go from working 9-to-5 jobs to building successful 6- and 7-figure online businesses and all the steps in between. Learn the strategies that worked and what didn't. Learn the mistakes that they made and how to avoid them, and then learn their plans for scaling their businesses and taking things to the next level. All so that you can build your business faster and easier and make more money without sacrificing the things that are important to you in your life. I'm your host, Leah Ray Getz, and with me is my husband, Todd. Now, let's get to it with today's guest. Hey, Digital Trailblazers, welcome. It's Leah Ray Getz and Todd here with me. And we have Chandler Walker. Chandler, go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience and let them know what you're all about.
Yeah, good to have myself here, I guess. Thank you for having me. But my name's Chandler. I started off in the business, the ads game, and this whole thing in about 2009. So it's been quite the journey. I remember back in the beginning, I basically lit money on fire and watched it burn. So it's been quite a journey.
Yes, there's definitely a learning curve to all this stuff. So what is your specialty these days? Like, what are you known for right now?
Yeah, there's essentially one main road that we're known for. We run Facebook ads for higher ticket coaches, and we're able to generate higher quality leads through messenger conversations. So we were able to personalize it and actually keep the personalization at scale.
So we're going to dive deep into all of that today. But first, let's get a little background story. How did you get to this place from here?
So basically, I actually have a weird story. I grew up with a mother who suffered from bipolar disorder, and it kind of taught me from a young age how to communicate with someone who has major ups and downs. And that led me into a med school path because it took a lot of years for her to actually even figure out what was going on with her. Most of the time, people would just tell her, oh, you just have to smile. There's nothing wrong with you. Mental illness doesn't exist. And so once she figured that out, it kind of was game-changing for her. So it led me on a med school pathway to kind of realize maybe I could make a difference and create a change in the world. But the problem as I got into that was it was radically different than I thought it was going to be. It was basically show up, look at this giant book, give people a pill, and then they leave. And it's not a shot at doctors. It was essentially, that's what people want. They walk in, hey, did you do anything to adjust your diet? Did you do any of this? No, I just ate my steak and taters and I just need more pills. And that was a real conversation a long time ago. And so I kind of got disenfranchised, and that led me to open up my first business, which is a brick and mortar centered around 6 pillars of wellness. And so the idea was mental health, social health, sleep, nutrition, fitness, habits. But the problem with that was coming out of a med school track, nobody told you how to run a business. So I was like, oh, mother of God, what am I going to do? I don't know how to do this. So that's kind of when the entrepreneurship journey began.
I love that journey because I actually started as a registered nurse and was very much into the pill, fix it kind of world until actually entrepreneurship led me to look at things a little bit differently and to really see the holistic view and lifestyle change and diet and all of these amazing things to actually heal the body and to undo all that stuff. So I love your journey. How did you go then from, having a brick and mortar to what you do now?
Yeah, good question. So I always tell people my journey is basically I'm just too dumb to quit. So I just kept doing stuff and eventually it worked. So when I started the brick and mortar, I realized that we had to somehow figure out marketing to get the business running. And this was back when Facebook ads were pretty new. Like nobody had any idea. There was no coaching programs. There was no consultants. There was no gurus. Actually, there was like one or two. There was like the Facebook ads library handbook or something. Distinctly remember reading that one book, but basically what it encompassed was, okay, I need leads. I have a business. Let me launch this ad. Oh, that didn't work. I just lit money on fire and threw it in the trash can. Okay, remember though, I'm too dumb to quit. So let's do it again, but change one thing. And I came from the science background too. So what it was create a hypothesis, test one thing, create a new hypothesis, test new thing. If it worked, try to break it. If it didn't work, test new other things to get rid of the initial hypothesis. And so I just kept doing that. until I figured out a system and just a method at that point to get people into my business. And back then it was like 98 cents for a lead, which was incredible. I would kill for that at this day and age. But that was where it began. And honestly, it wasn't that I had this like magical method that I knew what I was doing. Like I said, I was just too dumb to quit, and I had to keep trying, because if not, I couldn't pay the person to plunge the toilets. I had a brick and mortar. This was an online business. So it was like, if you fail, that you go under. You don't just sit there on your couch and sit there sad for it.
So true. I think, the brick and mortars there's so much more overhead and so many more things to think about. So, okay. So you from bullheadedness and science, it sounds like, figured kind of out what you're doing. How did you start to pivot into the agency model?
Yeah, good question. So you're probably wondering, like, why in the world did this dude open an agency? And in my perspective, I don't even know how I ended up in this area. But what really happened was my brick and mortar started to do really well. And because the brick and mortar started to do really well and I had a system, I started getting people asking me questions about it. And before I started coaching and consulting and really teaching people, I would move it into my own business and try to break it and fix it and try to adopt it and make it work. And then once that worked, then I would scale it out and start teaching people. And so we started to get a lot of people asking us, like, how are you getting leads? How are you growing this thing? How is it making sense? It seems like you're always on the up and up. And my response was, well, we're not. I'm just too dumb to quit. And I just figure things out because I just tweak stuff. It's not magic. And most people just aren't willing to do that and test. And so what that led was me going into an agency model with gyms initially, because that's kind of what I had, the health and mortar, the brick and mortar business. And so I started teaching these people what I was doing, and we had a system. And so we went from 0 to 250 clients in the agency space. This was right when the pandemic hit too, which was amazing for brick and mortar business owners, if anyone remembers this. But the good news for us was I started building this app, and I started thinking that we needed to transition and maybe have a global presence and be able to take what we're doing and make it national, make it global at some point. And so because of that, we got an offer to sell the brick and mortar just before the pandemic hit. And praise whoever lives up there, whoever you believe in, but that was the best thing that could have possibly happened for us, because it gave us the capital to not only scale and grow that app, but it gave us the capital to scale and grow that agency model as well. And so the good news about that is, as I scaled that, I was able to sell the app component. I was able to sell that first agency as well. And then I moved into a consulting practice where we are now, to where we help high ticket business owners grow and scale their business through the paid ads and through what I've done. So all this to say, I didn't just wake up one day and I was like, you know what? I watched Tai Lopez yesterday, so I'm going to open an agency. I got his SMMA program or whatever it was. And you know what? We're doing this. I'm 23 and a half years old. I'm in. I watched The Hangover and I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express, so it makes sense.
Exactly. There's a very low barrier of entry these days, and it does lead to some interesting things out there. So I'm happy to hear the journey and the expertise built up beforehand leading into this, which is awesome. So it sounds like you've grown your agency side and consulting side very fast, whether it was the first one or this one, like what worked really well for you? Like, how did you scale that quickly?
So typically for me, it was about ads. So I would hire coaches and consultants and people to help me grow, and they would tell me to like run cold DMs, which I'd rather jump off a tall building than do cold DMs, honestly. I'd rather bang my head against a wall. I could come up with some more analogies, but we'll do that later. But honestly, for me, it was like, I'm not doing that. So I'll just blow all my money on Facebook ads. I'd rather go bankrupt than run cold DMs. So that's what I did. I just ran Facebook ads. And like I said, I'm too dumb to quit. And I come from a science background. So I would figure out what works. I would tweak one thing, figure out the next thing that works. Initially, in the beginning, it was running to a landing page, getting people to book a phone call with an application, and then they would sign up. Then what I noticed was I wasn't able to control the quality. And because of that, it was a problem. And no matter what I put on the app, it didn't change anything. It's like, people are like, oh, just make your app more heavy in terms of qualifying. I'm like, yeah, perfect. So they can lie on the app and show up on the call and not buy anyway. And so I was like, okay, how can I pre-qualify and make this more personalized up front so I can get these people to actually, I know from maybe a 60% chance that they're going to sign up. It's never 100%. So my philosophy is, don't blame the client. Don't blame the prospect. That's what most people are like, oh, it's the client's fault. They didn't show up prepared. They suck, all that. And I'm like, well, no, it's my fault, because I can't figure out how to make this work. Because I can control that. I can't control what they do. I can control what I do and how I can create the experience around it. So then what I started to do was, I was like, well, what if we ran ads to Facebook Messenger? What if we ran ads to, back then in the beginning, you couldn't do it to Instagram DMs. Now you can. So then I thought, okay, well, what if I could have a personalized conversation inside of the DMs and essentially pre-qualify them and move them to purchase a high-ticket product or move them to purchase a low-ticket product if I didn't feel like they were qualified. I ultimately had the ability to personalize the experience at scale. And so that's when I started moving into the messenger ads. And what I noticed was I was able to get the people who are uniquely and primarily qualified for the actual phone call on the phone calls. Doesn't mean they were going to buy that day. My other philosophy is like, don't poke at people and force them to buy stuff, because then you're going to get refund requests. Then it's just nasty out there doing that. So for me, it's get them on the call. They're mostly qualified. Now make a decision as a professional as to whether or not they're going to be good enough or not good enough, but in a good position to be able to sign up.
Okay, so now here's where I got questions, because when we start talking about Facebook Messenger and messenger ads and messenger bots, it's like PTSD flashback to like 2016, and everything when they first came out, and for a while, like they were like the greatest thing since sliced bread, and it was like the Wild West of Facebook ads again. You could get ultra cheap leads and super engaged leads and all that. And then they started changing things, and that's when they would put rules in place retroactively, and suddenly your page was getting pinged and you were getting shut down. And if you had built like a messenger bot list, that list was no good anymore, and then you had to trash that page and start a new page and start over again. And so there's a lot of good, but then it kind of ended bad. And then what eventually happened, I think, was a lot of people just stopped doing messenger bots and messenger ads. But now you come in and you're saying, hey, we're still doing messenger ads and they work really well. So explain to me, like, what's working right now? What software are you using? Is it still ManyChat, or is it something else, Chatfuel, or is there something else that you're using? Is there some AI-based thing that's out now? How have the rules of messenger bots changed or updated or gotten better or worse? And how are you following those? Like, got a ton of questions around that stuff. Can you kind of lead us down the path of how you kind of survived that whole transition from 2016 to to where things are really good to then everything crashed, everybody stopped using them, and now you're still using them and you're having a lot of success. What are you doing? Like, this is kind of blowing my mind here.
Yeah, good question. So here's my philosophy in this business. Marketers ruin everything.
Yeah.
So something cool gets introduced, marketers ruin it. So what I kind of start to figure out is, what is everybody doing and how can I tweak this to essentially put myself out of business today so I'm better tomorrow? And that's what I started doing with messenger ads. I started thinking, okay, we have this area to where I can have a conversation with someone in a very, we could call it intimate environment. This is their private space that I'm invading. So what do they want in their private space? A human being. They don't want a bot, or they want to feel like they're communicating with a human being. So what I did was I stopped relying on bots when I noticed that everybody was relying on bots. And I noticed people coming into my messenger inbox immediately thought it was a bot. So what we did was we got away from the ManyChat philosophy, and now we use Go High Level as kind of a base to be able to move out of, which is better than, it's the best worst case option, if that makes sense. And so with that, though, what we can do is that when someone opts in, they have a keyword that's attached to them. We call this our keyword tracking. So what we're going to call it now is advanced AI keyword tracking, because as soon as you throw AI behind it, everything wins. Like if you have a stock, you put AI behind it, it pumps. If you're in crypto, AI pumps. So all you have to do is call something AI. But what we really do with AI is we basically, with our keyword tracking, now I got myself off track. With keyword tracking, what we do is we basically put a keyword behind the opt-in. So someone opts in, they use the specific keyword, and then that delivers a piece of value, the nugget of value, the carrot, whatever it is that we want them to have. And then that tags them inside of Go High Level, puts them into a sales campaign that says like initial point of contact. We move them into attempt to contact 1, 2, 3, 4, but we actually personalize the way that we interact with them in there. We don't use bots anymore. We try not to over automate. I think that's where we went wrong as marketers. We ruined it. And so get away from the idea of bots and move into the idea of personalized conversations at scale. So we have people who are professionals in the inbox who will initially go in and send a voice memo. Hey, so-and-so, I saw your profile. I thought it was really cool that you're doing blank. And I also looked at blank. Here's a loom on what I think you can do with blank. And then they usually respond because they're like, wow, there's no way that this was from a bot. And now what we're starting to figure out is we can actually have AI do those conversations, which isn't ready yet. But at some point, I think we'll start testing and implementing that stuff. And obviously, we'll all ruin that as well and have to do something else down the line. But once they get that initial message, then it can generate the conversation. So now it's like, oh, wow, I thought this was a bot, but it's a person and they interact with you. And then you can have the conversation conversation where you start talking about their business, talking about their revenue, or whatever it is that they're doing that we're trying to lead them to define whether or not they're a good lead or a qualified lead. And so with fewer words, the idea is figure out what everybody else is doing, bots, stop doing that, do something different and start doing that. So you're already a step ahead of the game.
Gotcha. Okay. So as far as workload goes, because now if we're getting away from bots, like that's what made all that so attractive to so many people, is that we could just automate it. We could flip a few switches and it works, and leads come in. But now we've got to put some manpower behind that. What, as far as like time commitment and all that, because I know a lot of people are like, well, you can only do so much as a person. Do your clients typically manage those DMs by themselves, or is this something where they would hire setters to do, or VAs to kind of manage to a point? How does that end work?
Yeah, good question. So basically what we're looking at, it kind of depends on where your business is at. If you're a solopreneur, you're going to do it yourself, because my philosophy is if you don't know how to do it, you can't teach it, especially with the sales team. If you're trying to lead a sales team and you've never been in the trenches, they will eat you alive. It's a living, breathing organism that has to be nurtured. So in the beginning, this is you. You got to get in the inboxes and actually do it and roll up your sleeves and do the hard work. I know a lot of coaches are sold the dream where it's like, hey, you just open this business and basically if you pay us 10 grand, within 2 weeks, you'll be drinking Mai Tais and Bora Bora. You'll never have to talk to a client again. So for me, it's like, no, and maybe down the road when you're not as involved, but in the beginning, you're in that inbox, you're going to be talking to people. And the alternative to that is just you're broke and things don't work. And people typically don't like that alternative. So, but once we scale and once we get this thing moving well, then we have SDRs, so sales development representatives or setters, whatever we want to call it, and they live in the inbox and they're producing the apps, they're reporting on quality, they're seeing everything going on, they're talking to the sales team about the sales team and what they're doing, sales team's talking to marketing about the ads and quality, so it becomes this living, breathing organism that is essentially sustaining and creating a sustainable infrastructure of quality versus non-quality, and then you can identify and quantify that weekly based on the reports. And it can be a little bit subjective because you're going off of what your setters say, what your sales teams say, and then marketers are going in there and integrating that. But it creates a pretty interesting parameter on being able to say good or bad versus the weak, and then you can adjust on there. And then over time, we can say, okay, Q1, good quality, Q2, bad quality, Q3, good, Q4, war zone. And then you can go back and go month over month, year over year, and you can identify where the good and bad pockets are so you can be ahead of the game.
Yeah. I mean, so managing our sales team, I can say this firsthand, it is a big thing to get them to produce, to pour into them constantly. If I did not have the experience that I do of being in the trenches to get us started and still touching in now and then now, I would not effectively be able to run our sales team. So people are often sold this idea that, just like you were saying, that it can be done for them, right? That they can just be a passenger along for the ride and just focus on being a coach. Good luck. Like I get it and it sounds amazing. I just have yet to see that effectively work.
Exactly. I'd buy it if it was possible. Like what? That's called being an investor. Let me just passively do this.
Yeah. Yeah. Instead of being a business builder, have a business owner who's on track with everything.
So with these centers that you're using, or I forgot what you call them, SD something?
SDRs. So we can just call them setters because I think this high ticket industry understands setters the best.
Yeah. Okay, so with these setters, I know, like with a lot of people who are teaching the organic marketing, the networking, the prospecting, where they're DMing people all day, they will hire other people to log into their account, and then they're the ones doing the messaging. So with what you're doing with these messenger conversations, are the people logging into your Facebook and Instagram account, or are they using their own Facebook and Instagram accounts? Do they need to be local? Like, do they need to be English speaking, United States, Canada, or can they be from overseas, India, Pakistan, or whatever? Okay, can you hire like a VA from a third world country for $3 an hour?
Yeah, good question. So for me, when we run ads, we're running out of our business page typically. So if we're running ads, we're running out of whatever our business page is. So we're getting VAs or not VAs, typically our setters and everybody who are logging in through there. So it's never really logging in through a personal account. Like for me, my Facebook, if you're talking to me, it's me. I've never had a setter or anybody log into my Facebook or IG. If someone wants to talk to me personally, I'm just going to talk to them. I don't really feel comfortable. I've never felt aligned with the idea of someone pretending to be you. So for us, it's always through our business pages. So whenever elite ads, elite, whatever we're talking about, whoever we're talking to, whoever the business owner is, it's through their page. Now, if we're working with a client, it's their ethical consideration as to whether or not they think it makes sense or not. But what we typically look at is it's okay, well, you're running ads, you have a brand page, it's your name, you have 200,000 followers or whatever. You obviously, I think they're smart enough usually to realize that you can't talk to this many people at scale, but now it's your decision. Do you want to run this and create a new brand page, which is a new page? We have to set this whole thing up, warm this thing up, or do you want to run this out of yours? And so it's kind of like their decision on that side. But for us, everything comes from ads. So we're able to run it out of these brand pages. But if someone communicates on the personal side, like if you were to DM me on Instagram right now, it's me. There's never been a VA or a setter or anything like that. And to answer your second question, for me, you have to have professional salespeople in there, and they have to have a percentage of whatever it is they're driving, because the problem with people from Pakistan and India and the other countries, the developing world, is they don't have usually they don't have a great command of the English language. And if a prospect comes into your inbox and they smell even a hint of that, instant scam, they're out. They don't trust you anymore. So like, and I'm not saying they're bad people or anything like that. They're some of the hardest working people I've ever seen in my life, but we would have to have a native command of the English language in order to make this work, because it has to be to the point where it's so personalized. It doesn't feel like a scam. It feels like you really care. And these people feel like they're connected to you at that point.
Yeah. It's high touch. It's high connection versus, just being able to push people through and to have anybody just kind of hitting the same button, sending the same messages over and over again. So
yeah, I know for us and with our sales team, like the number one thing that we really look for is someone who has industry knowledge, right? That they can speak the language, that when somebody, when a prospect is saying something to them, that they understand what it is, what it means, and how to respond to that in a way that makes sense. That's like the number one thing that we look for. And then, in addition to that, if they have some sales experience, that helps as well. But having that industry knowledge is something that's really important to us in our sales team. I'm sure that's, the same with other people in their businesses.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think is super important, and you're right, Todd, what we really want is we want someone who can speak confidently to the market and in a way that's appropriate for the situation. Often I get clients who come in and they're like, well, I just got to be aggressive, right? Push them in. I'm like, no, you got to be confident and show that you're a leader and talk to them in a way that's appropriate for the situation. It's like if you're in a sales call and I'm like, you need to buy today. They're like, well, this guy's a jerk. But I'm like, if I approach it in this way, I'm like, well, what would be one of the reasons you might possibly be interested in wanting to work with us today? My tone's not as aggressive. That's the thing that they have to be able to delineate and differentiate between in order to actually have effective calls, especially in Messenger, because if you're inside Messenger, it's easy for someone to take something way off on a tangent and take it the wrong way. So they really have to understand, and I'd even venture to say empathy is probably the most important thing that they have to bring to the table in order to make these conversations effective inside of the inbox.
As far as the ads itself, like what's a good budget to start with? What's a good expectation? And I'm sure it differs by niche. But as far as like, what is it cost per conversation? What does it cost per acquisition? Do you have any numbers as far as those things go as to what you can expect with Messenger ads?
So typically what I like to see in Messenger ads, I tell people you have to be careful in the low cost lead game. It's a big misnomer. People will say, well, I'm getting $3 leads. And you look in their inbox and it's pure trash. So what we need to do is we need to be able to get specific enough to get that lead cost to be somewhere around like $8 to about $13. If you're in like the health world, if you're in the business world, it's probably going to be somewhere around double that. And ultimately that tells me that we're specific enough to where we're going to have quality leads coming through, and we can get a cost per call booked that's somewhere around $150, which means that if you're the worst salesperson in the world, you should get 1 out of every 10 on a phone call. And of that, let's say you're the worst salesperson in the world, I always tell people, let's hope for the worst and then expect the best. So that way you come in with horrible expectations and you're really happy at the end. So then if you're the worst salesperson in the world, you should be closing 20% of those. So then your cost per acquisition in like the health world would be somewhere around, like we like to whittle our clients down to about $400 to $600. If you're in the business world, it's going to be at least double that, because when you think about business consulting, it's a much smaller market. You're dealing with just this tiny little microcosm of people who want help. So your cost per acquisition is going to probably be in the $1,200, $1,500 minimum range. And then for us, when we can produce that, we know we're at the minimum inflection point of success of getting about 3x return on your ad spend. And at that point, that tells me we can scale. a lot of agencies and a lot of people will start scaling. They're like, hey, bro, just spend more. I call it the spend more, bro. It's the frat marketing philosophy. What we want to see is we want to see that 3x return ads, ROAS come out. And then once that 3x return is there and we consistently maintain that, we can start pushing the budget up and we can start actually flexing and we can push that up to like a 5 or 6x and get ourselves in a sustainable place. And I think that's where a lot of agencies fail, is they're not able to create that consistency and scaling.
So in the health niche, 4 to 800, 4 to 600 cost per acquisition?
Yes.
Okay. And then, and if that's, so with your clients, what would you say is a typical cost of their programs? Like if they bring on a client, how much is that client worth?
Yeah, good question. So typically in the health world, the clients that we're working with are around $3,000 for like a 3-month program. Minimum I will let someone in is like $2,500. Less than that, and I just don't feel comfortable. I just don't know if we can get them the ROAS that they need. And I think a lot of agencies railroad people in this way too. They don't pay attention to what they're spending, and they don't pay attention to the cost of their program. So when someone comes on with us, we need to have a minimum cost to create a minimum inflection point of success, or it's not worth it for either of us, and it just creates a bad relationship.
Gotcha. Okay, and then so for a higher cost niche like the make money online business niche, what's the typical ticket price for a program there?
So the minimum we like to see in the business niche is around $6K. Most people are trained to pay around 10. So that's like where we really like to see it. $6K is about the minimum to where we'll bring people. And like I said, it needs to be double the health world because it's going to be double the cost to acquire these clients for these business owners. And we have to sometimes hit them with a little shot of realism. Like, look, man, it's a tough market. Business consulting is probably one of the most competitive things you can be in because it's tiny. You're competing and essentially eating your own self. And so you have to be ready to put a significant amount of revenue in order to make that sustainable and that work. And if you can't, it's not worth it. It's not worth it for you. It's not worth it for us.
Yeah, I mean, even like as far as other types of Facebook ads go, like that we have experience with and with our clients, like those numbers are good numbers. Like anybody would love to see those in their business, I think. Now, as far as like how many conversations you need to have to book a call to all that, like how much time do you need to devote per day to do this? And like how many conversations are you generating, and how many of those conversations lead to like a qualified sales call?
So typically what you want, if it's just you, basically just have your inbox open and available so you can hit the leads as they come in. Facebook ads, typically you're going to get people early in the morning and you're going to get people later at night. The people who come in around midnight, those are the mutants. So you can probably shut them off. You can probably make it so it doesn't run during those hours. If you're in the US, if you're running globally, obviously we can keep it going 24/7. And then what we like to see is if you're not the best salesperson in the world in the inbox and you're just getting started, we want to see what 1 out of every 10 probably turn into a phone call. If you're not hitting that KPI, then we have a problem when we want to look at what's going on in terms of the sales team, the sales process, the messaging strategy. And when we work with clients, and I think this is a problem with a lot of agencies too, we look at that. So we don't just have media buyers. The person's a strategist. I go through 150 applicants to bring on one media buyer inside of our agency. So it's pretty intensive. And what we want is that person to be able to look inside the inbox and immediately identify good versus bad conversations. And if they're bad, get that client on help immediately. So that way we can be proactive in fixing this versus reactive when the client says, oh, the leads suck and we don't know what to do.
So if we're having 10 conversations, one of those turns into a qualified sales call, we would need roughly 50 conversations per day to get 5 sales calls per day. Out of those 5 sales calls, if you've got a 20% close rate, that's 1 client per day at that rate.
Yeah, exactly. And typically, especially in the beginning, that sets people up for a minimum inflection point of success. 1 client per day, most coaches would kill someone to go that far and actually they're like, who do I murder and how do I make it happen? And I'm like, whoa, we don't need to devote a life of crime. Just put more money in the ads and we'll make it work.
As far as these conversations go, like how long do they drag out? Like how long does a conversation take? And does it usually drag out over a number of days? Like how long does it take to nurture these conversations to turn them into a sales call?
Yeah, good question. So typically when people come in, you devote somewhere around like 10, 15 minutes to a conversation. Your most challenging part is going to be that initial push, that initial idea of this is personalized and it's not a bot. Once you break that barrier, the person opens up fairly quickly, and then we can identify whether or not they're a good lead, bad lead, in between where we should send them, and then we can move them into either a phone call or purchasing like a lower ticket item. If it drags on longer though, our guys are trained to follow up, to consistently nurture that conversation, and also identify when it's going nowhere, because you don't just want to have a conversation with someone who's lonely for 3 years. If you're a health coach, well, hey, you're lonely, let's help you. But if you're a business coach and someone just wants to keep talking to you, it's like, hey man, we can have a beer at some point, but I don't know if this is leading anywhere. So you have to be able to identify those conversations and be able to nip those, and also be able to move someone away from, as Jordan Belfort used to say, Pluto. When they're off in Pluto and you're like, well, let's come back over here. We don't need to be talking about porcupines and nacho cheese chips. Let's come back and talk about like what's going on over here.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And that's definitely an art form, knowing how to manage those conversations. I think that really speaks to your point about hiring the right people to the setting and the conversations and everything. So if we're doing 15-minute conversations, and let's say over the course of a day, like if we're putting in full-time hours, let's say you can devote like 6 solid hours to doing this per day. That's about 24 conversations per day. So that would end up being one client, like if you're putting 6 hours into that, one client every other day, which is still pretty darn good.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, with coaches who are just starting out, if they're getting a client every other day, like I said, they'll half murder somebody for that. They don't have to full murder yet, but they're pretty excited about that. If they get one client a week, sometimes they're happy. And so because this industry is notorious for not being the best, people come to us and they're just ecstatic that it actually works. And I'm like, man, we have a really low barriers of success over here. It's this.
Yeah. So I'm curious on the show up rates on your calls, comparatively from like the traditional like VSL book a call funnel ad to the messenger ad. What have you seen the difference there?
So typically for us, our show up rates, our minimum inflection point of success is about an 80% show up rate. So we want to see about 80% of the people who you've talked to as a human being show up for the call. And what we can do after we have the conversation to book is we can come back in Messenger and say, hey, just wanted to let you know what the call looks like. One of the things I teach our clients too is don't be mysterious and weird about the phone call. Tell them exactly what's going to happen. Outline it. Send them a little loop. Like, hey, you just booked in. Really glad we had this conversation. Just check out the link below and you can kind of see what we're going to talk about. People run away from fear. Why? Because as human nature, fear is a construct that prevents us from getting hurt. So what do people do when they're afraid and they don't know what's going to happen on the phone call? They run away. They don't want to get hurt. So that's what we have to battle once we're beyond that. And half the battle is that personalized effort we put into in that messenger conversation to where we've already built trust. Someone booking off of VSL, they're like, oh yeah, just a talking head. This guy's probably a scam artist and I'm out.
Yeah, I was going to say the follow-up after you book the call, we figured out is really important in increasing that show-up rate. Because, I mean, we've had clients come in that, they hired somebody else to put together a book a call funnel for them. And it's, it's an ad that goes to an application form that, and they book a call. And like their show-up rates are just abysmally low. Like they may have a low cost per booked call, but nobody's showing up. And the people that do show up, like you said, they're just not qualified. They're broke. They're kicking tires. They're just not qualified. So, having that messenger conversation, I think to qualify them first is a really neat strategy. And then you're much more confident. It seems to me like that messenger conversation is acting basically as like a discovery call or a triage call, some people call them, where it's like that's where you can really qualify people to make sure that they're serious, that they've got a problem that you can solve, that they've got a goal that you can help them to achieve, that they've got financial resources to move forward if they want to do so. So they're super qualified by the time they get on the call. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what we've done rather than having to get on phone calls with people, which is already a battle, because now it's hey, let's get on a first phone call before a second phone call. I know you don't trust me, but please talk to me. I'll send you a Starbucks coffee via Uber Eats. But for us, it's like come into Messenger and they'll text you. And the way people work now is they won't answer phone calls, but they'll text you all day. So we can get them in that environment, inside that space. We can allow them to really open up. So when we get on the actual sales call, we've already nailed out and hammered out what the biggest objections are and what the biggest problems are. So we can move into the sales call with a lot of quote unquote ammo ready to go in order to have a decent conversation with that person and actually help them understand, hey, the problem's over here, but actually this is really what's going on over here. And this is why you have this gap you haven't been able to fill.
Yeah, that's really neat, because I know like for a lot of our clients, one of the things that we teach people how to do is how to just pick up the phone and call your leads. Like if you need to bang out some sales right now, like that's hands down like the quickest way to like get some book calls and get some clients under your belt is just pick up the phone and call your leads. But there's just such a fear that people have of picking up the phone and calling your leads, that they're super resistant to it. And I think what you're doing here is a much, it's much more in people's comfort zones to be able to do this through Messenger. And especially if if you message somebody and they don't respond, then that's fine. But the people that are going to respond are probably going to be the people that actually want to have a conversation.
Yeah, exactly. And those are the people who will jump on the sales call and be like, hey, when I saw you talk about blank and you asked about blank and you did this, I was basically sold at that point. I felt like I could actually trust you. I feel like everybody else makes me watch this stupid 10-minute video and then I'm on a phone call and they try to hard sell me. And I'm like, well, it's true. We're here to help support and sustain you. We're not like, have you seen that Dave Chappelle meme where he's like got the crack on his lips and he's scratching his head? You got any leads off that VSL? You got any shows? We're able to be a little more picky with that. And we don't have to destroy our sales team with all these leads and hope and pray that a VSL is going to convert at some point, or follow the other gurus who are like, you need 1 to 10,000 views in order to even know if it works. I'm like, okay, great. Well, I just blew 30K and it didn't work. So now what do I do? Oh, just do it again. Oh, okay. So blow another 30K. Okay, let me just I blew another 30K. What do I do now? How much credit do you have? Keep doing it. So we want to get out of that philosophy and into the philosophy of how can I be more specific and organize what I'm doing to a point where I have control over the process at scale and I have control over the quality of the people coming through and I don't have to wait 25 years in order to figure out whether or not these leads are going to make sense.
So you mentioned that VSL, like, is there a VSL or anything in this process at all that you introduce, or is this just all like message conversations and then book a call and close them on the call?
So we still use a VSL. I like the VSL because it's a carrot that will get them to opt in. So you have a bunch of copy and then it's like, well, what I did was I prepared this simple 3-step strategy that you can use right now to blank. If you want it, click the button below and the button's the keyword. They click the button, they get it auto-delivered in there. Then we initiate the personalized conversation from there. And so what we do is we take the best of both worlds. Like I don't really care if you watch the VSL. I care that it's a carrot I can use to get you to opt in to have a conversation with me.
Okay, so that's the ad, and the ad is the VSL. You're running traffic to an ad that says, "Hey, get this free training." The training is a VSL, and then they comment on the ad to get it. And then when they comment, that's when you start the messenger conversation.
Yeah, exactly. So they'll like click the button, and the button automatically activates the keyword, which then goes into our messenger, and then it tells us that someone's opted in, obviously, and then delivers the carrot to them. Then we can initiate the conversation at that point.
Nice. So does that need to be a VSL, or could it be something simpler like a PDF or some other cheap lead magnet that you give away?
It can be pretty much anything. I think the big thing that makes it work or makes or breaks it is how clearly it identifies the problem, which a lot of people are, let's take the health world, for example. They're like, hey, get this thing on how you can eat and train however you want and get results. And nobody cares because it's such a saturated offer. But if you're like, hey, if you have leaky gut and you've had this problem for the last 10 years where every time you wake up, you poop your pants and you want to stop pooping your pants, click below to get this 3-step strategy we call it the anti-poop method. So stuff like that, it's very clear. And that's what we have to do. So you can make that a VSL, you can make that a PDF, like free course. It doesn't really matter what it is. What matters is how specific you can make it so it actually speaks to your audience. And business coaches have the biggest problem here because they're like, let me get you leads. Okay, so does everybody else. Who cares? But they're like, hey, look, if you've been through 45 different agencies and you've spent pretty much an entire house of trying to figure out how these things work, here's the reason why it didn't work. We call it advanced AI keyword tracking and opt in to get it or whatever. So we can actually get more specific with business owners and help them identify really what's going to get people to care in such a saturated market.
Have you tested the VSL versus like a easier like PDF giveaway? And have you noticed like a difference in the quality of leads, or is there? What's your take on that? Because I know like whenever we run an ad to a free PDF giveaway, that's definitely a cheaper lead than trying to run an ad to a VSL.
Yeah, good question. So in terms of what we've tested and what we've seen, the VSL almost always outperforms in terms of quality. It's more expensive. And like I said at the beginning, you might not have a $3 lead, you might have a $13 lead, but they're going to be much higher quality from the VSL.
So I'm curious on the ad itself. So are you doing like picture ads, video ads? Like what is the ad format, if you will?
So this is really dependent on who you're working with. There's some people who you ask to do a video and you have to run the video and it's like nails on a chalkboard. You're like, wow, man, you can't even talk to a wall. So this is not going to work. I will have to do your video. I did someone's VSL a while back and I was like, I'm just going to do it. This is unfathomable how bad it is. And so sometimes we have to recognize that your clients don't have the talents to be successful at the things you're asking them to do. And you have to figure out how to make it work for them because you brought them on as a client. Like when I'm doing it, when we're doing sales calls, I'm not asking them if they can act and how good they are on video, which we probably should identify, but it's still not, in my opinion, we can still bring them on board if they're not good on video. So if they're not, then we can test images, or we can use some other, we can have like, I'll make videos for clients sometimes, but we have to really recognize like, what is the talent we're working with? And if we had the perfect world and they were good at everything, then videos typically outperform images. But you don't live in this perfect world. And sometimes it's a bit of a challenge to work with clients who aren't good at video. They might be the best coach in the world, but they're on video and they're like, hello, I have this thing for leaky gut. And if you click below, you'll get the simple 3-step strategy to buy it today. Oh, you're not going to buy it. You're going to do a phone call. Just click below. And then I'm like, nobody in this world is going to click on that.
Yeah. Well, and not only that, but a lot of times it's even just the other things going around, right? Like they've got bad lighting, or the microphone isn't, it's bad audio, or the background is all weird. There's a lot of things that go into a good video that a lot of people don't even think about. And it's not the easiest thing to do, especially if you've never done it before.
Yeah, exactly. And in order to get client to produce a video, we have to have a step-by-step guide on how to produce a video. So you're right. Here's the mic you should use. Here's the mic if you're using your phone. Here's the mic if you're using a computer. Here's the webcam you should use. Here's the background you should use. Please don't be in a college dorm room with beer all over the wall if you're trying to sell a health program. Like, we have to be able to clearly identify what is good and what is bad, because anything that you leave to ambiguity is the thing that will fail and the thing that they'll screw up. And then you have to do 17 edits, and all of a sudden you've wasted a month to try to get this client launched. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's not their fault, it's yours, because you weren't proactive.
So if video works really well, and if all things are equal, video, it sounds like, is the best option. Vertical video or horizontal video?
Vertical, typically, if we're on Facebook side of things. If you're on like YouTube, obviously you're going to flip it. But if you're on Facebook or TikTok, stuff like that, we're going to go vertical.
And is this something you just run on Facebook and Instagram, or like you mentioned TikTok? Is this something you can do on TikTok or other platforms as well?
Yeah, typically we can't run to DMs on TikTok. They're coming out with the strategy, so when they do, we'll launch it. We do run TikTok ads for clients. It's a little bit more challenging to make it work. Basically, I have to do it through text messages, so we can actually integrate it through like Go High Level and stuff like that, and have the text message be the catalyst, if you will, for moving them forward. So we do run TikTok ads right now. When they open up the DMs, we'll take over the world over there as well. So that's kind of what it looks like.
One question I was kind of wondering in the back of my head. So with the old, messenger bots like ManyChat, Chatfuel, things like that, like Facebook had all these rules about, how you could contact people, and there's a window of time when you could respond to people and all that. Does that still apply when you're using like Go High Level and things like that, or does that not apply?
It does and it doesn't. Facebook's not as strict as they were. Like if you go in there and you message someone 45 times, you're 100% going to get shut down, because now you're a spammy bot. So you have to be careful. They pay attention to what you're doing. If you have messengers and setters in there copy and pasting, you're going to get shut down. It's bot behavior. If you have people in there who are just being absolute jerks, you're going to get blocked by people and you're going to get shut down. So you have to pay attention to, number one, are you treating people well like humans? And if someone opts in and they're a jerk, just let them go. Don't be a jerk. There's no reason to fight with anybody. Just be gone. I don't need you in my inbox. And then number three, if someone is copy and pasting, we have to eliminate that right away. So we have to make sure that we don't teach that as a strategy.
So they have to vary, even if they generally follow the same flow every time, they have to say it slightly different whenever they do.
Exactly. Or just Facebook literally pays attention to whether or not the speed of your typing versus the speed of your copy and pasting. So even if you type the same thing every time, you're going to be okay.
Very interesting. I love it. There's so much here to pick apart. And I know my brain's just cranking, and I'm sure our audience is as well. If you had one piece of advice to give to the coaches out there that are drooling a little bit on this strategy, what would that one piece of advice be?
My biggest piece of advice is, it feels like sometimes people need permission to do something. You're a coach, you're in this industry, you're an entrepreneur. I know we grow up in school and life and everything where we have a set schedule and structure and all that, and you're told what to do. But in this world, the only reason we figured out things is because, like I said at the beginning, we're too dumb to quit. So if you want to test this, just launch some messenger ads. It might go horribly wrong and it might not work, but tweak it, test it, adjust it. Just be a scientist. You don't have to be a certified Facebook expert and have 44 years of experience to start doing this. I didn't. When I was in the beginning, I was like 26 years old and had no idea. I lit money on fire for a while. Literally, just basically should have just burned it because it didn't work at all. So all you have to do is get in there, launch 5 ad sets. In those 5 ad sets, have a different audience in each individual ad set. Run the same copy against it. Run a video versus a picture. Run it to Messenger. get in there and have a conversation with people, deliver them a little VSL, and then see how it goes. And then test, pay attention weekly, go over what worked, what didn't, what can I adjust, what can I modify, what worked, keep it, what didn't, adjust. One thing at a time. Because if you just adjust more than one thing, you have no idea what worked.
So what would be some of your proudest moments for your clients, the biggest successes you help them to create?
That's a good question. The proudest moments for me, and this isn't a typical client success story, are when clients have gone through 5 or 6 different agencies or more, and they come to us and they're finally doing well. Because it's like we have clients. We had a client last month who did $1.6 million in revenue off of like $300K in ad spend or something. So like that's cool. But what's cooler is seeing someone who's basically lost $100,000 to agencies and gave us a chance for like who knows why, by the love of all that is holy, they decided that we were going to make it work, and it did. Just to see like their face light up and to finally see them be able to be successful with something after so much like destruction and just pain is one of my favorite things in the world. And so I always say part of our agency is devoted to picking up the pieces. And I think it's really neat to see that, because even personally myself, I've been railroaded by business coaches and the industry, and I know what it feels like, and it sucks. And it feels like you're never going to get out of the hole. And when you do, it's like the most gratifying moment in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're comfortable with it, brag on yourself for a minute. Like, what have you been able to accomplish with your agency itself?
Yeah, good question. So in the last 5 years, we've been around for about 5 years. We've done about 50 million in revenue. And so our agency is growing. It's really hard to hire people as we grow, though, because like I said, it's 150 applicants to one actual media buyer we bring on board. So we maintain a small team, and we definitely are strained at times, but we have such a high touch philosophy and a philosophy that works so well. I think it's allowed us to, it's not the money that really allows us to move forward. It's the retention. Our retention is somewhere around like 96%. And because of that, we don't have to put in an enormous budget on the front end. We're able to maintain and get referrals and actually move people into our other programs and stuff like that. And they stay in our ecosystem. Like our average client stays with us for more than 12 months, and they spend somewhere around like 75 to 100K with us, just because they know they stick with us. They don't leave, because we have that high touch philosophy. And like I said, my philosophy is if you take care of people, they'll take care of you. If you don't care, then obviously we'd have a 3% retention rate. We'd have to spend an enormous amount of ads and make zero profit. And that's the biggest problem with agencies too, is they spent an enormous amount of ads. They don't pay attention to what their retention and back-end stuff looks like. And then they have to spend an enormous amount of ads again. And it just becomes this revolving door that just never resolves itself.
So if people want to connect with you and your agency, where should they find you?
Yeah, good question. So I'm going to actually send you to my DMs like I just talked about for an hour. So if you want, what I did was I prepared a little video, so you can go through this actual experience yourself, and you should. I'm not going to sell you anything or be a jerk. You're going to go to my personal Instagram, just instagram.com/Chandler, CHANDLER_SAF. And what I did was I put together a video that outlines the exact strategy that we use, that you can use right now to build, grow, and scale these messenger campaigns. That way you don't have to pull your hair out and wish and hope and pray and get permission to do it. I'll give you permission by giving you the exact strategy. And then if you get stuck and struggle, you can obviously talk to us and hire us. But if it works, great. You just got something for free that changed the trajectory on your entire business.
Awesome. This has been such a fun and enlightening conversation. Thank you so much, Chandler, for being with us today.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. Hopefully everyone enjoyed it, and I hope y'all have a great day.
You've been listening to the Digital Trailblazer podcast. For show notes and information about today's guest, head to digitaltrailblazer.com. Now, if you love this episode, if you got some value, make sure you leave us a review and subscribe. And be sure to share this episode with anyone you know who could use help to build their business. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.